25-year-old Rick Wohlhuter of the United States broke the world record for the 1,000 metres in Oslo, Norway on the 30th of July 1974, running a hand-timed 2 minutes 13.9 seconds. Wohlhuter held the record until Britain's Sebastian Coe returned to the Bislett track in Oslo on the 1st of July 1980 to slice half a second off the record. Wohlhuter's record still stands as the US record and is the longest standing US track and field record.
Hello, friends. It's just a couple of guys talking everything with Pat Crimmins and yours truly, Ray Rogina. Today, we will have a phone conversation with a St. Charles native and Olympic runner, Rick Wohlhuter. Rick will discuss his running career, his 2 Olympiads, and being named Best Amateur in America in 1974. Stay tuned. Hello, friends. When you think about buying a new or used vehicle in the Chicago market, there's only one name that really stands out: McGrath. When you are thinking about which brand is synonymous with reliability, value, technology, and performance, it's Honda. Put the two together and you have 2 great options: the all-new McGrath Honda in St. Charles and McGrath Honda in Elgin. Both stores are ginormous with acres and acres of inventory. Choose from Honda Civics and Accords, CR-V and Passport, even the Ridgeline truck. Visit our brand new location, McGrath Honda in St. Charles or McGrath Honda in Elgin. You'll be glad you did.
At McNally Heating and Cooling, we understand that customer satisfaction starts with arriving at your home on time. Your service technician will apply the same attention to detail and quality workmanship to every job, large or small. We offer upfront, honest pricing, and we'll make sure the job gets done right from start to finish. From furnace and air conditioning service, minor repairs, or total equipment replacement, we do it all. Give us a call or find us online and let the luck of the Irish work for you.
Well, we're back here and pleased to have on our Just a Couple of Guys hotline, Rick Wohlhuter, athlete extraordinaire from St. Charles. Rick, a real pleasure to have you on the podcast here today.
It's good to be with you this morning, yeah.
Rick, I'd like to start being a former faculty member at St. Charles High School and Pat being an alumnus of that school like you are. Let's start with you growing up in St. Charles, the year you graduated from high school, your running career in high school, and then we'll segue all of that into Notre Dame where you went to university.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So let me give you an idea how I got started in sports, in particular running. You know, I wanted to, in grade school, play basketball. I thought basketball was probably one of the greatest sports since the weather conditions are consistent. Since you're indoors, it's a nice little sport. And when I got to the 7th grade, you know, I went out for the team, but I got cut. And so that was rather disappointing to me. And then in the 8th grade, I tried again and I was cut again. So I could see the handwriting was on the wall. I was not going to be a basketball player of any sort. So I thought that maybe in the spring I'd go out for the track team. After all, track's a sport maybe 2,000 years of age. I thought this might be something kind of interesting. And in addition, all of my classmates in school were largely going out for the team as well. So it was a great thing for me. And as it turned out, you know, I kind of hung in there for many years while all of my friends had dropped off the team years before. And so that's really how I got started in track and field. And I had some good success in the 8th grade. And then when I got into high school, you know, I ran as a 9th grader. I had modest success there. But beginning my sophomore year in high school, we had 4 years of high school at the time I was there. And then they dropped it down to 3 years my sophomore year. So I was always at the bottom of the pile there in high school, my first 2 years. But I went out for the cross-country team, and that really kind of changed everything for me.
And just as an aside, Rick, for our St. Charles audience in particular, who were the coaches that influenced you, that lured you into this, and that helped you develop your career?
Well, when I was in the ninth grade, I had Roger Weller was the primary coach I trained under. And then for cross country in the fall, I trained under Paul Bergeson, who eventually became the athletic director.
Yes,
neither of those two are alive today. When I was in the eighth grade, I had Bill Warner. He was actually my first official track coach. And I kind of learned the sport in high school from them. Usually in high school, everybody goes out for a sport just trying things out to see what fits, if they want to continue with it. And it was really the same for me. I was trying track and field in the eighth grade, and I just had some success with it, so I stayed with it. And I think that's one of the reasons people hang in sports, and for other things for that matter, in their life, is they have some success with it and they want to continue with it.
Now, go ahead.
And I was going to say, as it turned out, by my junior year, I was doing quite well. I finished eighth in the state high school cross country finals, and then I did win the 880 yards at the university for the state meet at the University of Illinois in Champaign. And this was my junior year. And then my senior year, I came back and finished third in cross country. And then I did repeat as a champion in the 880 yards in the state final. So that was really a very good high school career for me.
Now, was Notre Dame recruiting you all this time? Because you obviously went the run with the Fighting Irish. So talk a little bit about that transition and how that all played itself out.
Well, at one point in my high school career, I had maybe the fourth, fifth, maybe sixth fastest time in the country. And so I was recruited from schools from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. But I wanted to stay with a little bit smaller school that was in the Midwest. I just wanted to stay close to home, I guess. And so Notre Dame was a real nice choice. It was a bit smaller than, say, a Big Ten school anyway. And it offered a lot. It was well known, which was a nice thing too. And so I ended up there. And I was lucky that they offered me a grant in aid, as they called it, which is essentially an athletic scholarship. Since it was a private school, a little bit more expensive than a state school. So I trained under a coach by the name of Alex Wilson, who actually ran for ran for Canada in the 28 and 1932 Olympic Games, and he also was a middle distance runner as I was. So he and I got along really well since we ran the same event, and so I learned quite a bit from him while I was in college there. And I had some injuries which kind of held my career up in college, because once I got to the collegiate level, then the training intensity was a little bit more intense. And so then the risk of injuries is a little bit higher. And then I had a couple of injuries, particularly with my Achilles tendon. And so it held me back a little bit. Although I did win one NCAA indoor title in my junior year. But my senior year, I pulled a hamstring muscle running a race right the week before, so I could not defend that title. Yeah. So that was my only real championship victory in NCAA victory while I was in school.
Now, while at Notre Dame, though, on an individual basis or on a team basis, who were some of your toughest competitors?
Well, we ran against some dual meets against some Big Ten teams, and we ran in what was the conference called the Central Collegiate Conference. And in fact, one runner by the name of Dave Waddle, who was on the Olympic team with me in 1972, who also ran the 800. He and I were competing a lot. And so those are probably most of the guys. I can't recall all of them. It's been nearly 50 years plus since I ran in college.
Rick, this is Pat Crimmins. I'm class of 1979. When did you graduate?
I graduated from high school in 1967 and college in 1971.
All right. Well,
so I've been around a while.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of your accomplishments and things that have happened along the way. Apparently, 1973, 1974 were good years in your career. U.S. national champion for the 800 meters in both those years. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how that worked.
Well, after I came off the Olympic Games in 1972, I fell in the heats, and we could talk about that at one point here this morning. But I wanted to continue my career because I felt I was just really getting going at the international level. And so, I trained and lived in Chicago, and I ran for the University of Chicago Track Club, and I trained at the University of Chicago at their indoor and their outdoor facilities there under a coach by the name of Ted Hayden. And we had actually quite a few runners on our track club, and these were postgraduate runners who wanted to continue with the sport but lost their college eligibility, and I, of course, was one of them. And part of along the way, I ran in a variety of different meets, indoors and outdoors, and I flew out to California to run a race in Los Angeles, and that in that particular race, it was 880 yards. I set my first of several world records in that race. And so, of course, the meet promoter was real happy about that. And that's really how I got going at a more higher level in the sport.
Right. Now, you talk about being losing eligibility, but so you were like redshirted, or this was just as an amateur athlete outside of the college atmosphere?
It was as an amateur athlete. Part of the problems, and this was true for me, is once your college eligibility is over in the so-called amateur sports, you become what's kind of called an emerging athlete. You're good, but you haven't really proven yourself quite yet.
Right.
And that is true for me. And so it's hard to get in some races because there's other guys who are more proven than you up to that point. And so you have to produce the times in your performance levels in order to get into these better competitions to improve your overall performance and standing in the world. And that's what happened to me. And so by joining the track club here in Chicago, that he gave me the opportunity and a vehicle to train as well as compete in various competitions. And I'm really grateful for the coach's help in that.
So it's my understanding in 1973-74, you were ranked number one in the world for the 800 meters by track and field. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And
yes.
What does that mean?
1974 is my best. What now?
What does that mean?
Well, what they do every year, Track and Field News, which produces a ranking of all competitors in the world and in all of the track and field events, starting from 100 meters all the way up through the marathon, including field events. And I was ranked number one in the world based upon my performances for 1973 and 1974, 1974 being my best year
right
up to that point.
Well, you talked about your world record in the 880, and then you had another world record in the 1,000 meter, which remains, I think, the longest standing American outdoor record. Is that correct?
When I traveled to Oslo, Norway, which is where I ran the 1,000 meters in the end of July 1974. And so we had a very good field there. The pace was very brisk. And I knew I was going to at least get the American record, but I knew I also had a shot at the world record at that distance. And as it turned out, I did win that race. I ran 2:13.9, 2 minutes, 13 seconds and 9/10, which was a world record in that event at the time. And of course, if you're an American athlete, you also get the world or the American record as well. Now, my world record has since been surpassed by about 5, maybe even 6 runners up to this point. But the American record still holds, and it's the oldest American record so far. And it's 48 years and a few months now. So maybe I'll make it to 50. We'll see.
Right.
If someone takes a shot at it and betters it. It would be kind of interesting to see.
Well, they're always working on shoes. So better shoes, faster runner, right?
Well, better shoes, better equipment, better track,
right.
Better training, better diet. Everything adds up.
So 1974 was your year, basically, and you won the Year and Sullivan Award as the nation's top athlete. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, that was quite an honor for me. Very unexpected. And that's all amateur sports in the United States. And I was voted as number one. So that was quite a nice thing for me. There are other track and field athletes through the years who have also won that award. But I was very glad to have that. That was a very nice thing for me. It's kind of a way to acknowledge my accomplishments And so, as I say, quite unexpected.
But we're very proud of you. Let me ask this question, Rick. Do you recall any of who were your competitors that year in other amateur sports?
I don't recall exactly who was. I think the number 2 guy that was voted just behind me was a big basketball player. Probably went on to sign a big NBA contract, which might have helped me out a little bit since I was not getting anything like that. So.
We're going to take a small break, and when we return, I want to discuss with Rick the 2 Olympiads he participated in 1972 in Munich and 1976 in Montreal. We'll be right back. Hello, friends. This is Ray Rogina. You face technology challenges every day that threaten to steal business, compromise data, and bring your business down. Without a good partner to help protect from phishing, ransomware, viruses, data breaches, employee turnover, and cybersecurity threats, your business is at risk of losing everything. TechWorks has been the trusted IT partner to Fox Valley businesses for over 20 years, keeping systems secure and providing extraordinary customer service, helping your business grow. Call TechWorks today at 630-482-2227 or visit www.techworks.com. That's TechWorks with a Q. TEQ works, and see how TechWorks IT service can transform and secure your business. Hello, friends. This is Ray Rogina. I'd like to say a few words about my friends at the Karas Group of Restaurants, one of our sponsors. I've been a frequent guest at all of their fine restaurants for years, one of which is Rookies, which has locations throughout the Fox Valley and beyond. My favorite dish at Rookies is the gyros plate with the saganaki appetizer. Oopah! My wife, she loves the Hall of Fame chicken sandwich. But I can honestly say that I've never had a bad meal there, regardless of whatever I've had to eat. The wings are out of this world, the salads are delicious, great burgers, tacos, all American specialties, and don't forget their pizza. And of course, you can wash this all down with one of their famous Mai Tais. Try them out. St. Charles, Geneva, Elgin, Hoffman Estates, Huntley, and Roselle. RookiesPub.com. I'll see you there. We're back, and I would like to pursue a conversation with Rick about, obviously, highlights of his running career, and that would be participating in the Olympics in both 1972 and 1976, each standing out for a particular reason. Rick, in 72, there were no medals won by you, but obviously the participation in the Olympics was obviously of tremendous importance. But most of us that are a little older, Rick, and for our younger audience as well, who probably don't even know this, there was a tragedy that occurred at the 72 Olympics in Munich. And you want to talk a bit about that and how you reacted? You were over there, and tell us a few stories about that if you can.
Well, let me explain how I got involved with the games, or how I made the team anyway.
That would be good. That'd be good.
Yeah, we'll start with that way, then we'll get into everything there in both games. In 1972, my real goal was to make the Olympic trials. You need a certain minimum performance time to get into the U.S. trials. And so it took me all the way until early June to get that meet that performance standard, and the trials began near the end of June. And so I flew out to Eugene, Oregon, where they were held, and you go through 3 heats. So it's a preliminary, semifinal, final. And so I was running really pretty well at the time. And so I got through the first heat. That's when everybody you knock out the people who are not going to make the team, but, are decent runners, but they're there more for the enjoyment and looking toward the future. So you get into the semifinal. Now, this is where you have to pay much more attention to what you're doing to make sure that you qualify for the final. And so my goal was always to try to get into the first 2 automatic qualifying spots, and not have it be on the bubble where I might get into the final or I might not. But I did make the final. And now the Olympic trial finals in the 800 meters in 1972 was a pivotal point in my career. And I'll tell you why. We had some very good runners in there. Jim Ryan was in that. Dave Waddle was in that. Ken Swenson, who was the American record holder at the time in that event. Plus me, I like to say, but I was kind of a dark horse at that point. But I knew that tactically I had to stay up near the front of the race because there are 8 of us in there. So I didn't want to have to pass any more than need be. And since they took the first 3 runners automatically made the team, I needed to beat just 5 of them out. And so I had to stay in contention. And so we ran the first 400, which is the halfway point, and we were very fast split at that point. And we came around at 500 meters out, 300 meters to go. That's still a long ways in that event to go. And then Jim Ryan took the lead right away. Dave Waddle followed him right away. They really jumped out. And I had to make a very quick decision. Do I go with these 2 guys and risk maybe failing at the end of the race, or hold back? And I decided to go with them. Probably the best decision I ever made in my running career. And so we come around to the final turn, and here I am. I'm in second place. I'm going, oh my word! But I still had about 50 meters to go, and I'm feeling the strain of the race at that point, of course. And I just hung in there, and then I suddenly passed Jim Ryan, and then Dave Waddle kind of passed me, and I ended up in second place. And then third place was less than a whisker behind me. And here I am, second place among the 3 qualifying runners. It was just a tremendous feeling for me having made the Olympic team. As I said, I was a bit of a dark horse to do that. It was, up to that point, one of the greatest experiences in my life. And
this was at Hayward Field at the University of Oregon, right?
That's correct. It's considered Track USA, I guess, Track and Field USA out there. Certainly a great facility to run in. The crowd is really fantastic out there as well. Once we made the team, I came home back to St. Charles for about a week, and then I flew to Brunswick, Maine at Bowdoin College. We had a quick training camp there for a couple of weeks. And from there, we flew to Oslo, Norway, which is where we held our training camp. And we trained there in Oslo, which is the site where I set my 1,000-meter world record 2 years later. So we trained there, and then we traveled around Europe running in various competitions. And then from there, near the in about mid-August, we flew down to Munich, Germany, and where we took residence in the Olympic Village. And just a side point here, the Germans did a fantastic job in sponsoring the games. And in fact, they did such a good job that we had the cafeteria would run 24 hours a day. And the food was tremendous there. So what I was doing, I was eating 4 big meals a day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. And then, around 10:30, 11 o'clock, I have to go back for another big dinner. This place is open 24 hours a day. Eventually, I had to cut that out. I probably gained 3, 4, 5 pounds during that for a short period of time there. But anyway, as it turned out, we marched into the stadium for the opening ceremony. And the Germans did a tremendous job in sponsoring the games there. And we marched all into the center of the field. And then they released all kinds of pigeons flying around. So we had to duck a little bit for that. And in my event started the second week. Swimming events essentially were the first week. Track and field started in the second week. And as it turned out, I fell in my preliminary heat. And although I did get up, but I just missed qualifying by a few hundredths of a second. And I was running so well at the time. I know I would have gotten a medal, I'm sure anyway, but that didn't happen for me. So my experience with the games was over. Now, what happened later, and I should talk about security. And in Munich, the fence around the Olympic Village was about maybe 6 feet tall. You'd see a chain link fence. And essentially, this is what it was. So it was very easy to climb over the fence. And this is what happened. The perpetrators came in, and then they invaded the Israeli apartment. They were staying in a townhouse. I was staying in a high rise. I was on about the 8th or 9th floor, and I could look out and see the Israeli townhouse where those athletes were staying, and I could see some of the Black September group that was there. I could see one guy, we had his mask on, and I could see the barrel of his rifle he was holding up over his back anyway. So I could see firsthand what was going on, and I was probably living maybe 300-400 yards at that from where all of this was taking place. And of course, they closed the villages down. They closed the games down for that day. And although I won't go into great detail, we had some unfortunate events happen after when they went to the airport. They had a big shootout there, and some of the Israeli athletes were killed. Some of the Black September group were killed as well and captured, and were later released on an exchange program, I guess, to hide out back into wherever they came from, I guess. And so it was a very disturbing event, and there was so much military that came into the villages, and everybody, the police with heavy armor, machine guns, and I believe they had some tanks below. There was under the high rises, of course, because they were going to be used as condominiums and apartments after the games were over. And of course, they had a road down there so they can supply the buildings, I guess. And
Rick,
so there's a lot of military you didn't see.
Rick, if I may ask, did you feel your safety was ever in question?
Actually, I was 23 at the time, I probably did not think my safety was in jeopardy at that point. You could only get so close to where all this was taking place anyway. And we had a television set in our room, so we could see what was going on. And of course, so could the perpetrators. They could also see what was going on. And so I'm sure that aided them to some point, to some degree anyway.
And I said to you offline, I would mention this just in passing. Those of us who followed the Olympics in '72 know about the infamous Russian victory over the United States in the basketball gold medal game. It was frankly stolen from us. I think there's no other way to say it. Everybody can watch the replays on that. Talk to us a bit. You obviously knew a couple of the athletes on the basketball team, and I remember Doug Collins from ISU was one such athlete. But what happened there? What was the fallout from that particular event?
Well, I did see one basketball game as a preliminary game for the United States. I saw some swing events, some other events too I could go to. But I don't know too much. I wasn't there for that particular, in the final game against the Russians. But I did talk to a couple of the players years later. And of course, they were very disappointed and felt that they were cheated in this particular game. And at that point, this was just a few years ago, actually, they still have not accepted their silver medal. And they said they never would take the medal, only the gold. And of course, they'll never get that, obviously.
Right. Well, speaking of medals, though, we fast forward. Pat talked a bit about your activities in the mid 70s there, including the Sullivan Award. But then we get to 76 and another Olympic Olympiad, if you will, in Montreal, where you did have success in the 800 meters. You won a bronze, but that didn't come without a little bit of, how should I say it, a little controversy, I suppose. Talk to our audience about what happened there, because initially you were accused of bumping somebody and did not win the medal, but let's talk about that.
Oh, okay. I know now. I exactly recall what you said. In the semifinal heat, there was a Russian, interestingly enough, who shoved me into I believe it was a Jamaican or Caribbean runner anyway, and knocked him completely out. And in fact, I stumbled too, but I was lucky enough. I caught myself and was able to still qualify for the final. However, probably 20 minutes later, I was disqualified, and for shoving this Jamaican runner out. But after they reviewed the film, as our coaches complained about that, and then I was reinstated since it wasn't my fault, and so which was a good thing. So I was glad about that. I was, quite surprised that I was disqualified. But it was not the first time people are disqualified for various things. So I was reinstated, and then, of course, I ran through the 3 races in the 800, and I also ran the 1,500 meters, too, which was another 3 races. So in total for me, 6 races in 7 days.
And you finished sixth in the 1,500. But
I finished 6th in the 1,500. I'm not really a miler or a 1,500-meter runner so much. Though I did make the final in that event, but by the time I got to the 6th race in the 7th day, I was pretty exhausted, and so I was unable to finish better than 6th in that. Now, if I'd been fresher, I might have even gotten a medal in that, since the pace was a bit on the slow side, which would have played into my hands a bit, as I'm a fast finisher. At least I like to think I am anyway.
And this is the Olympics, if I recall correctly, that Bruce Jenner won the decathlon.
Bruce Jenner did win the decathlon there. It was a great triumph for him. He certainly was a very great athlete, and he went on to many other things after the games.
Yes, he's been quite busy. Now, was this 1976 Olympics the first video challenge, red flag challenge in Olympic history, as far as you know?
No, and I'm sure it wasn't. So,
but there was a process for that?
For when I was disqualified, there was a process for that.
For challenging that?
Yeah, they can challenge it, yes. Yeah, things are challenged all the time, and apparently, and this was one of them. So I think I was probably the only runner who was disqualified, but thank goodness I was reinstated.
Sure. Now, after the 76 Olympics, how did you continue to run for a little bit as an amateur or a professional?
I ran one more year, but just till about the end of May. Normally, I would travel to Europe during the summer months for about. I purchased a 22-45-day excursion ticket, and I'd usually stay about 45 days. But I didn't do that, and this was in 1977, the year after the games. I decided that I'd had enough. It was time for me to move on. I still ran. I did, but I didn't compete anymore. Mostly what I did was run these road races, 10Ks, and nothing longer than that. But I had some fun with that for a number of years.
And when you say road race, is that like a steeplechase for a horse, or what are we talking about here?
Well, at the time, the running boom was taking off in the late 70s. And probably in part because Frank Shorter won the Olympic marathon in 1972. I think some credit him with spurring that on. And I was just participating in that. Some charities and banks and a variety of different groups would hold these 10K races. Sometimes it was marathons too, but there were a lot of 10Ks, like turkey trot runs, they would call them, sometimes on Thanksgiving Day and events like that. And I ran in those for, probably close to 10 years before I decided that maybe I'm getting a little too old for this sort of thing.
Just out of curiosity, though, Pat, I was going to ask Rick, he's a short distance runner, but have you ever run a marathon?
No, I've never run a marathon. No, I leave that up to the marathoners. It's a little too far for me. I'm just a middle distance runner.
Okay.
So what have you been doing since, Rick, since you left the sport?
Well, I probably, like everybody, I had to earn a living, and so I worked in the insurance industry for a little bit, for a while. In fact, I started that while I was still competing, and I stayed in that industry for a few years after I retired, and then I moved on to work for a variety of different corporations in the Chicago area. Actually, I developed a reasonable expertise with a spreadsheet, and I moved numbers around. A lot of companies, especially large companies, are always filing paperwork and moving numbers around, and so I participated in doing that as well with various employers through those years. And
did you get involved in coaching or anything like that?
I did not actually get involved in coaching. I know people have asked me that, and looking back today, I think, well, maybe I should have done that, lended some of my experience and expertise to younger runners, but I never did. So,
well, it's my understanding you were inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1990.
I was, yes. In fact, the first Hall of Fame was in West Virginia, and then they moved it to Indianapolis, and now it's in New York City, somewhere anyway. And I've been there one time, and when it was in Indianapolis, and they've done a real nice job of putting together the history of track and field through the years.
And of course, you're in the St. Charles Athletic Hall of Fame for the high school, which
yes, I was.
We're almost proud. Do you still run today, Rick?
I do some running, more not as much as I used to, trying to protect my body, I guess. I've done quite a bit of swimming more recent years, and I do some, physical fitness, flexibility, core exercises, as they like to call them as well. Just try to stay active, watch my diet, watch my exercise, and stay as healthy as one can. You still have all your original parts, or your hips and your knees, and et cetera? Surprisingly, I still have my original hips and knees. If I'm ever talking with an orthopedic surgeon and he knows I ran a number of years in track and field, they always ask me about my knees. And I've been lucky. I've had no problems with my knees to date. Let's hope it stays that way, of course.
One last question, Rick, wrapping this up. Who are your track heroes? You had to have somebody in there, or some individual you looked up to, and perhaps then heroes that you ran with, but that you always emulated and you always looked up to.
Well, as I was still in high school, I would look up to and admire runners such as Jim Ryan, because he was often in the news for track and field during his mile exploit days. And then I had a chance to meet him, but not until 1972, when I had finally reached a similar level that he was at. And he was probably the one I admired the most. I admired some of the people in my track club as well, and I admired Steve Prefontaine, who was fairly well known in the running community. In fact, I even traveled with him. We competed in various meets in Europe while he was still alive. Unfortunately, he passed away in 1975 in a car accident.
Right. Well, listen, Rick, we want to thank you so much. Pat and I thank you for taking time to discuss your accomplishments firsthand. Many of us here in the Fox Valley know who Rick Wohlhuter is and his athletic accomplishments, but we're happy that you joined us in providing the personal detail of these athletic achievements. So once again, thanks a bunch. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, you're welcome.
Stay warm in Florida. It's below zero here in Illinois, just so you know.
Oh, okay. It's going to be about 82 here today in Central Florida. So.
All right. Thanks, Rick.
I'll be on the beach later.
Thanks a bunch. I really appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, great.
Thank you, friends. Don't forget, we are here to generate a weekly podcast that we hope you will enjoy, and will provide you with a lot of thoughtful, useful information for our listeners here in the Fox Valley. And a reminder to patronize our fine sponsors. So, for our producer, Paul Stukel, looking bronzed and rested after some R&R south of Illinois. For Pat Crimmins, who along with yours truly, Ray Rogina, still remain pale and cold. Wishing you a pleasant morning, afternoon, or evening after listening to our podcast, and reminding you to stay warm, be kind, and be safe. So long, everyone.